Welcome back to Proxy, everybody, and today we're going to be diving into the last Druhkari index tier list before the new Codex. So basically what I aim to do in this video is kind of get myself back into the Druhkari mindset here and talk about some of my experiences with the Druhkari over the course of 10th edition. Now, I have been playing the Druhkari on and off for a while now, mostly as a proxy army, so I don't actually own a full Druhkari army anymore. I used to be a big, kind of Druhkari player back in 5th edition and 6th edition, but I sold that army, and I've kind of just been proxying here and there when I want to try out new stuff from the army. But I've decided I'm going to dive back in because I am very much enticed by the new Druhkari reveals. So, right off the bat, though, I do want to mention that I hope none of the units on this tier list, except for one, because it's already been axed, but I hope none of them actually get moved to Legends. That would be really sad. Having said that, I still think the army would be fun to play. I know a lot of people will be upset, but I have faith that the rules will be good because the Eldar rules were really good. The Eldar Codex was awesome. And I think the Druhkari Codex will be good as well. Time will tell, but I'm optimistic, and I'm choosing to be optimistic with a couple of reservations. But for the most part, it's good vibes. So let's dive right in and kind of talk a little bit about the Druhkari and where each unit fits on this tier list. So again, tier lists are mostly just my opinions. Obviously, I'm somebody who plays Druhkari from time to time. I'm not a Druhkari main or anything like that. So take my advice with a grain of salt, but I have used every single unit in this list more than once, and I have a few insights that a lot of you, especially new Druhkari players that are trying to get into the faction, can probably benefit from. So first on our list is the Ravager. So the Ravager is a classic Dark Eldar model. It's one of the first models that basically they've ever had. It was in the original Dark Eldar Codex back in, if you can imagine it, 2nd edition. And the Ravager's always been pretty much a staple in Dark Eldar armies. I don't think there's ever been a time where it was truly awful. There have been times where it has been overshadowed by other stuff, but it's never been like garbage tier in my honest opinion, and that remains the case now. Having said that, it's not good in every single army. It's not needed in every single army, but it is so cheap. It's only 100 points, guys. It's so cheap that it's easy to fit in at least one of them to give yourself some long-range anti-tank support in pretty much any detachment. So, if you guys don't know, the Ravager is basically 3 Dark Lances on a Raider chassis. It's a little bit tougher than a Raider. Instead of toughness 8, it's toughness 9. And it, in Sky Splinter Assault, can benefit from a 4+ invulnerable save via stratagem. It's still not that tough. It's about as tough as an Eldar Falcon. It's actually slightly less tough because I think it has 11 wounds versus 12 the Falcon has. And it has a little bit of a worse save at 4-up. But it is packing some serious heat. So you can either give it the Disintegrator Cannons or the Dark Lances. In this current meta, the Dark Lancers are just the better option. The Disintegrator Cannons are really good against heavy infantry like Marines and stuff, but they're not quite as good into what we're seeing in the meta today, which is a lot of vehicles, a lot of monsters. So I actually think the Ravager is quite good at 100 points, and I'm going to put it in A tier. It's not an auto-include, right? There's other units that you could have in your army for your anti-large. We'll talk about those later. But the Ravager is a solid choice, and you can kind of sit in the back line. It's very narrow as far as its, how big it is. It doesn't take up that much space for being a heavy vehicle, a heavy long-range vehicle for the Dark Eldar. So, you can kind of sight it down a firing lane, fire 3 Dark Lances off. If your opponent tries to do something about it, they're often just going to waste their shots because it's so cheap. It trades up against a lot of enemy vehicles. And it gets built-in rerolls. So you are going to probably use a pain token on it. And by the way, the Druhkari ability now is pain tokens. If you put one on a model during the shooting phase or fight phase, you get to reroll hits. If you put one on a unit during the movement phase, you get to reroll advance rolls, and in the charge phase, you get to reroll charge rolls. So you're usually going to give this guy a pain token to reroll all hits, so it's very accurate, and you're usually wounding things on 3s. So this thing is pretty good for its points, only 100 points. All right, moving on to the next unit, the Archon. Now, the Archon is a staple. The Archon is something you will have in every single list. Now, the Archon's ability, he has 2 abilities. One is he has what we call a Vect aura. This is from way back in the day when, the Dark Eldar had Vect in their army. I know it's been a while, but Vect basically increases the kind of command point generation or command point usage, I should say, of models. And this guy does the same exact thing, right? So within 12 inches, if an opponent uses a stratagem, it costs 1 more. Very powerful ability, but it is situational. And that's one of the weaknesses that the Dark Eldar have, is they don't really have any CP generation outside of discarding secondary objectives. So with the Dark Eldar army, you're usually not going to take fixed objectives for this very reason. And of course, when I say Dark Eldar, I mean Druhkari. Dark Eldar is the old term for them, but of course, I'm kind of an old hammer guy myself. I've been around for a while. So occasionally I call them the Dark Eldar, but the Archon is fantastic. So that ability is good, situational but good. And his other ability is actually what makes him auto-include, in my opinion, which is he has the ability, when you empower his unit, to not only reroll the hits, but also reroll the wounds. This makes him insanely good with units like Incubi, Kabbalite Warriors. Basically anything he can join, he makes 100% better. So this guy's phenomenal. And for that reason, he's on auto-include. Now, let me tell you about some secondary things that he has that also make him just really good as well for his points. So he's 85 points, which may seem pretty expensive for a character, but actually for what you get, it's a steal. He has a 2+ invulnerable save. Yes, you heard me correctly. A 2+ invulnerable save. But like most elf things, like most elf trickery, there's a catch. As soon as he fails one of his 2-ups, he loses it for the rest of the game. This means your Archon can either go splat in a single hit, which has happened to me before, or he can survive an entire unit shooting at him. And I've seen both. I've seen both things happen. So very strange for your opponent to have to go into, because they don't know what's going to happen either. And that can get them to overcommit, and that can be to your advantage. So he does have that 2-up invul. And lastly, I do want to mention that his Vect aura that we talked about only works if he's the Warlord. So he does actually need to be the Warlord for that to work. Okay. Archon's fantastic. Let's talk about the Court of the Archon. So the Court of the Archon is like the Archon's bodyguard unit. Think of it like, if you're an Eldari player, it's kind of like Warlock bodyguards, but it's Drukhari, kind of Drukhari styled. So you have 4 different models. You have the Urgul, you have the Layman, you have the Slith, and then you have the Medusa. And each of them do different things. So the Slith gives whatever unit the Archon and the Court join -1 to wound. So you basically get a -1 to wound buff permanently while the Slith is alive. The Urgul gives the unit fights first, which is also awesome. The Layman gives the unit lethal hits, and the Medusa basically has a battle shock type of ability where whatever she hits, she battle shocks. Battle shock is a mechanic that is better for the Druhkari currently, because they get pain tokens every time an enemy unit fails the battle shock test. So there's a lot of units that actually cause battle shock that are better in the Druhkari than they are in the Eldari roster. So yeah, amazing unit, the Court of the Archon. Basically what you do with it is you join your Archon to it, and then you join both of them to a Kabbalite Warrior squad, and you put them in a transport. So you use a Venom to split the Kabbalite Warriors up, and then you put an Archon in the Court of the Archon, you join them to a Kabbalite warrior squad, and it becomes a really powerful unit that is good at fighting and shooting in equal measure. The problem with the Court of the Archon, in my honest opinion, is that it takes too long to actually shoot the unit, because you have like 8 different weapons in the squad, and everything has to be shot separately because it's all different profiles, which makes it annoying to deal with. But it is powerful. Again, everything's getting lethal hits. Everything's getting the ability to, basically fight first. So there's a lot of different things going on there. But it is complicated to learn it, right? The other thing is the Court of the Archon is like the definition of doing everything well, but nothing super excellently, right? Like, it's a good unit in combat, but it's not the best. It's a good shooting unit, but it's not the best for the cost. So it does a lot of things well. It's just, it's not the best of anything that the index can offer. So Incubi, if you take a squad of 10 Incubi, they're going to do more damage with the Archon than the Court of the Archon and the Kabbalite Warriors package. Same thing with Lilith and Witches, right? They're going to fight first more effectively than the Court of the Archon. And, they are a decent unit, though. I will say that. And I do like them a lot, and I think that they are quite powerful. And they're cool, which is always a plus. Weirdly enough, they are tough for an Eldar unit. And, of course, they come with all sorts of other benefits because Kabbalites give them sticky objectives and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's a good unit. I'm going to actually put it in a strong choice. I'm going to put it above the Ravager because I think that the Court of the Archon is an amazing unit. It is a little expensive. You're paying a lot of points for this package with the Raider and everything, but I think it is worth it in some games, and if an expert uses it correctly, they can do a lot of damage with it, and they can make a lot of things happen. Okay, let's talk about Reavers. Reavers are, how do I say this? They're just okay. I think, honestly, they're very fast. They have OC2 apiece, so they can steal objectives away from opponents. And I think this is about where their strengths really lie. They do get a Heat Lance or a Blaster, but you're always going to take the Heat Lance with them. And that's about it. Their damage isn't great. Their durability is very bad. And they just are fast. That's about it. All they have going for them is that they're very fast and they can get up there very quickly. I think they're a situational choice, personally. I think if your army has 65 points left, there's 65 points for 3, by the way, not too expensive, and you're looking for something fast that can steal objectives away from opponents, this might be a unit that you can use in your list. However, having said that, I think there's other units that are just better for the points in a Druhkari army. So keep in mind, for 65 points, you can also buy a unit of Mandrakes, which in my opinion are a much better unit. Yes, they can't do the little steal objective thing from across the board, but also there's so much terrain on the board a lot of times that you have to position your Reavers almost perfectly to be able to do something like that. And your opponent has to not realize that you can do it because they're just going to put some OC on the objective, make sure you can't steal it. So I've used these guys several times. I think, honestly, the best they've done for me is steal 5 primary points and then die. And that's all they've done. It could just be luck, but I've run them in several games and the Heat Lance never does anything. It has never done anything. Ever since Sky Splinter Assault came out and I started running these more, it's never done a thing. Ironically, the only time Reavers have ever done something for me is actually in the Ynnari, in the old Eldari Index Ynnari lists, where you could reroll a hit and reroll a wound roll with, the Eldari Index. But yeah, ever since that got dropped, they just haven't been really that good. So yeah, situational choice for sure. I think, not terrible, but also not the best choice. Okay, let's move on to Urien Rakarth. Okay, so Urien Rakarth. I used to think this guy sucked. I didn't understand the point of him. I was never able to use him correctly. You know, it took me quite a few games to understand why he was good. Now I know why he's good. He is an S tier unit. He's an auto-include. Now, why is he an auto-include? Well, he has a combination of abilities that makes him really hard to deal with. And on top of that, he's actually pretty hard to kill, right? So first of all, let's go through his kind of what he does. So first of all, he is very tough. His stat line is toughness 4. He has 5 wounds. He has a 4+ invulnerable save, and he has a 4+ feel no pain, which makes him extremely annoying to deal with for your opponent. He's also pretty cheap. He's only like 85 points. So that is pretty good as it is. However, it gets better. He has the ability to get up on a 2+. So he has Fuegin's revive ability, basically. This turns him from kind of a, tough, maybe objective or kind of objective style unit that can score you area denial and cleanse and stuff like that. That turns him from that into somebody that can actually just mess up your opponent's plans altogether and perhaps even win you the game. I've used this guy a couple times, and in my latest games with him, now that I know how to play him properly, he always does something. He always scores points. Either he scores a primary point for you because your opponent can't get on that objective, or he denies a primary point, or denies a secondary point for your opponent because they can't get area denial off of him. And in the worst case scenario, maybe he gives your opponent assassination, but he just gets back up anyway, and he's going to still do his thing, right? He's a great character. Now, he also has a once per game flamer attack. It's like 3d6 attacks, dev wounds, strength 4, something like that. And it does a ton of damage to light infantry, and it could possibly even kill something on low wounds because it has dev wounds and torrent. So that's pretty good as well. His melee is not too good, but he does have anti-infantry 2+ with a little bit of AP. So he can do some damage to, some infantry units and stuff like that. Overall, though, he's an objective piece. He's something that is going to allow you to score a primary point on an objective that you were never having any business scoring, right? Or denying your opponent something that you had no business denying. Because usually Dark Eldar are a pretty squishy army, and Urien is almost the exception to this. He does also have another rule which allows him to revive Wracks. So he can revive some Wracks. I think you get to revive D3 Wracks, I believe. And you can also revive but you can heal Talos and Kronos as well. But it is an incredibly short-ranged ability, and it's not really why he's good, but it's just an extra bonus in case those units happen to be around him. Okay, Urien's awesome. Let's talk about the Talos. The Talos is amazing. The Talos is probably an auto-include, but it's probably lower on the list. I really love the Talos. They, for me, have never truly failed me. I've actually won games because of these things. And they're not the toughest things in the world, right? Their toughness is 9, right? Their toughness is just average. Their wounds is 7. They have 7 wounds apiece. But really where the durability comes in is that they have a 3+ armor save and a 5+ feel no pain on top of a 6-up invul. So 6-up invul doesn't seem that good until your opponent forces you to take 3 saves and you roll a 6 out of them, and you're reducing the damage by 33%, right? So 6-up invuls aren't that good until they are, until you roll some 6s. The other thing about the Talos is that once you empower it, which means basically once you kill an enemy unit, you're empowered for the rest of the game. So what empowered means is you basically get all of the benefits of pain tokens. So I kind of explained this at the beginning of the video. You get reroll hits. All of your hits for the rest of the game, you get to reroll. In those specific phases, so in the fight phase and in your shooting phase, you get to reroll hits. You get to reroll advance rolls. You get to reroll charge rolls. without having to spend pain tokens for the rest of the game. That's if they kill an enemy unit. Next, their weapons are actually really good. You have damage 3 flesh gauntlets, which are amazing. Strength 8, AP -2, damage 3. It seems crappy at first. I believe they hit on 4s. But remember, you're re-rolling your hits because you have pain tokens. And also, if you use a pain token, you get a permanent -1. Well, it's not permanent, but it's permanent if you get empowered through their ability. But you get -1 AP on your melee attacks, which brings it up to AP -3, which is really, really strong. So these guys can pack an incredible punch in combat. But it doesn't stop there. They also have a twin-linked liquefier gun, which is a basically twin-linked flamer with AP -1. It doesn't have ignores cover, unfortunately, but it does have twin-linked. And they come with a haywire blaster, which is also twin-linked. So you're re-rolling hits and re-rolling wounds with the haywire blaster, and you can take Talos in squads of 2. So you can have 2 Talos firing 4 haywire shots every single turn, re-rolling hits and wounds. Really good against vehicles. Talos are the reason why vehicle-heavy armies are not that effective against the Dark Eldar, because they have so much haywire potential. Now, the problem with the Talos is that they're slow. They do have fly, so they can move over enemy models, but they are pretty slow. So you do have to factor that in. Turn 1, it's usually prudent to make sure they advance and maybe even use a pain token on them so that their advance roll can be good enough to get into a good staging point for the next turn. Because again, speed 7 is not great, so they don't move very fast at all. Okay, next unit is only in Reaper's Wager. It is the Death Jester. And the Death Jester, guys, sucks. It sucks. It's a fun unit in Reaper's Wager. You know, you get to reroll 1s to hit. Sometimes you get to reroll 1s to wound if you're losing the wager. But overall, it's just not good. So I'm actually going to put it in garbage tier. First of all, it does cause Battle Shock, which can be useful for, you know, pain tokens and stuff like that, but it's not guaranteed. You're spending a lot of points on this guy in Reaper's Wager for basically a shirking cannon that maybe will give you extra shots every once in a while, right? I've used the Death Jester in Reaper's Wager for fun when I'm just messing around. And it's ironic that when I run it just casually for fun, it happens to just roll all 6s. Actually, in my game, it killed a Falcon. Brought it from like 6 health to 0 health, which was insane. But yeah, the Death Jester is just, I would say it's garbage tier. I think it sucks. It is a lone op, but honestly, I don't really think you need one in a Druhkari list because you have so many cheap options that can kind of provide that same thing that the Death Jester is going to provide you. So yeah, overall, I think it's not very good. Plus, damage 2 weapons are not really something that the Druhkari need. We have a ton of damage 2 weapons in the army, whether they be ranged or in melee. All right, looking at the troop. So again, a Reaper's Wager special here. So the troop is actually pretty good. I think it's a strong choice in Reaper's Wager. It has devastating wounds. There's not a lot of units in the Druhkari roster that have devastating wounds, so that is cool to have in your army. You can, of course, attach a Troop Master to the unit as well. And I'm going to go ahead and just kind of skip here a little bit, and I'm going to put the Troop Master in a strong choice as well, kind of alongside the Troop, because you're going to take them together. Basically, what this gives you is a unit that is always rerolling, at least rerolling 1s to hit, and maybe sometimes rerolling 1s to wound, with devastating wounds, and also has the ability to consolidate and pile in 6 inches with the Troop Master, which is really powerful. And again, the Troop Master with rerolls is insane. He's already getting reroll 1s to hit base, but now he's getting reroll 1s to wound on top of the Harlequin's ability to have +1 to wound. And on top of this, in Reaper's Wager, you can give them sustained hits 1 or lethal hits, which is again, it's insane. So they can have some extreme damage potential against a lot of units. Now, why aren't they an auto-include? Well, quite frankly, I think they're obviously only limited to Reaper's Wager, so you can't take them anywhere else. You can take them in other Druhkari armies, but they're terrible. They have no stratagem support or anything like that. They don't have access to pain tokens, which also is kind of unfortunate, but they are very strong, even though they're a little bit pricey. Next up is the Starweaver. The Starweaver is also a strong choice just because of the fact that you can take it in Reaper's Wager with the Troop Master, and the Transport. That's really why they're good. So if you're wondering why I'm putting these Quinn units in A tier when they're only good in one detachment, it's because that's the only detachment they can really be effectively used in anyway, right? So in that detachment, they are pretty good. The Starweaver allows the troop unit to re-embark within it, just like a Venom. So, without spoiling too much, spoilers ahead, the Venom has the same ability. So being able to use this in conjunction with other Druhkari units that are doing the same thing, it has a lot of synergy. So I like the Transport. It's a little bit more expensive than a Venom, but it's also more durable than a Venom because it has a 4-up invul save. Okay, next one is the Voidweaver. Now the Voidweaver, it sucks. And I'm actually going to put it poor choice. I don't think it's completely garbage because it is a decent gunboat, but it's really expensive. You have better options in the army. You don't need Lone Op 18 because, quite frankly, a lot of the terrain layouts make it really hard for a 24-inch weapon to effectively make use of Lone Op 18. And the last thing is the weapon on it, the lances, right? The Void Lances, they're not good. They're not called Void Lances. They're called, I think it's called like a Prism Cannon or something like that. But the Prism Cannon is not great. Or Prismatic Cannon, that's what it's called. The Prismatic Cannon is not great. It's essentially a worse Dark Lance at 24 inches. And again, we have the Ravager, which has 3 Dark Lances on it for 100 points. So why would I pay more points for something with less range, less durability, and just worse weapons, right? I mean, shuriken cannons are okay, don't get me wrong, shuriken cannons are good, but we already have so many damage to sources, it just doesn't really make sense, right? So I think it's a poor choice. I know some people will disagree. It does get reroll 1s to hit and maybe to wound in Reaper's Wager. But again, I just don't think that makes it worth it over the other choices that can benefit from the exact same stratagems and bonuses. Okay. Let's talk about witches. Witches, in my honest opinion, are a strong choice. They're great. And I would actually put them above the Ravager. Now, I know that's kind of controversial because witches were so awful in the early index days of 10th edition. But they're actually really good now for the cost. It costs only 80 points for a squad of 10. They have, when they're empowered, they have +1 AP on their weapons, so they're strength 3, AP -2. Again, this doesn't sound great right now, but they're very cheap. And when you join them with a character, they become exponentially better. So with a Succubus, they get possibly fights first, or, well, fights first when they're empowered, and sustained hits 1, which is amazing on a unit that can reroll its hits. In Sky Splinter Assault, it gets the Lance keyword, so it gets +1 to wound. And when they're with Lilith, they get strength 4 and additional AP. Or additional attacks. Let me actually double check on that one. I'm pretty sure, though, it's additional AP. Let's see here. Good old Lilith. By the way, Lilith is one of the best units in the entire roster, and we're going to talk about her very soon. So yeah, so what it is it's strength and armor penetration. So you get +1 strength, +1 AP, and of course, fights first. right? So Lilith is an absolute monster, but witches are a really good unit that's also very cheap. They don't cost a lot of points, and they're extremely effective for what they are. They die like in droves when they're caught out in the open, but with Venom support and all the different tricks that the Druhkari have, they should never be stuck in that position in the first place, unless something has gone wrong. So yeah, witches are very good. Honestly, even as a cheap 80-point squad that you can, combat squad into Venoms just for like little trading units that can score you objectives, I don't even think they're that bad for that purpose in the right detachment. I do think that there are worse in Real Space Raid, which the detachment in Real Space Raid is kind of more suited towards units like Taloses and Kronoses and stuff, and not really, even though it's supposed to be, not really witches or Kavalites. Okay, so yeah, witches are good. And also their ability's pretty good as well. They prevent opponents from escaping by forcing them to take desperate escape tests if they want to fall back from them, which does sometimes help. So it's basically a situation where you can tie up a huge unit that's not really good at fighting, just because if they want to fall back from you, everybody's going to have to take a desperate escape test, which is very useful. All right. Scourges is up next. Now, Scourges, they started the edition at like 110 points. They're now like 130 points. I mean, maybe they were even cheaper than that. I can't remember. But they've gotten incredibly expensive. 130 points for 5 toughness 3, 4-up armor save models is insane. Now, what the Scourges have going for them is they have a move, shoot, move ability. They can move 14 inches, shoot something, and then move 6 inches back, which provides a little bit of safety for them so they don't get immediately killed. Scourges are a unit that get their value not in one turn of shooting, but over the course of the game. And I do think they are one of the Dark Eldar units that is basically an auto-include. So I will include them here as an auto-include. However, I don't think they're an auto-include because they're an amazing unit for the cost. I think they're an auto-include because the Dark Eldar really don't have a ton of options when it comes to anti-monster and anti-large that can also survive a clapback. So I used the Ravager as an example earlier as something that your opponent probably doesn't want to waste their time shooting at. And that's because the Ravager is only 100 points, and basically every other anti-large platform in the game is more expensive. Even the Predator Annihilator at 135 is quite a bit more expensive than the Ravager, right? So if your opponent brings an Annihilator out to kill a Ravager, it's okay because the Ravager doesn't cost that many points, right? It's probably going to die, obviously, but it doesn't cost that much. On the other hand, Scourges are very, very expensive, and it just takes a squad of Bolter Marines to kill them. I would even go a little bit less than that. A squad of Scouts can kill them very easily by just shooting bolt pistols at them and charging them, right? They're very easy to kill. However, being able to take 4 Dark Lances in the unit or 4 Haywire Blasters and then enhance yourself so you're rerolling hits, even though you're hitting on 4's base, being able to reroll hits is really good. It means that you're essentially getting a 75% chance to hit. So out of every 4 dice with a reroll, you're going to get about 3 hits on average. 3 out of 4, 75%. And that means you're essentially putting out about an equal amount of firepower as a Ravager, but you also get to move back behind terrain into safety. So Scourges are a very good unit. They're just expensive, unfortunately. And luckily, the rest of the army is cheap enough to make up. Okay. Next up is the Voidraven Bomber. Now, the Voidraven Bomber is one of those kind of wacky units that you really don't think is good because you're like, oh, it's a flyer, it sucks. But actually, it's really, really powerful. It's especially powerful in Reaper's Wager, where you can give them sustained hits or lethal hits on their weapons and also empower them. One of the things that makes the Voidraven Bomber so good is that you can empower it for a pain token, so it can do monumental amounts of damage to infantry or vehicles. You can give them the Void Lances, which have 2 shots apiece. You get 2 of them as well. So it's basically like having 2 upgraded Dark Lances because they are stronger than Dark Lances. They have AP -4, I believe, and Strength 14. Or you can give them Heavy Disintegrator Cannons, or at least I think that's what they're called. Basically, they're Strength 8, AP -2, maybe even AP -3 now that I think about it, and damage 2. So they can really scythe through a lot of heavy infantry. Also, being a flyer means you have to shoot it. And because you have to shoot at it and you can't engage it in combat without a flying unit, this makes it harder to deal with, especially if you have it properly screened out from your opponent. So again, very matchup specific, very matchup dependent. But if your opponent doesn't have a ton of, long range firepower, this thing can actually survive past 1 turn. And the last thing I'll just say about this thing is if it does survive, it does have a pretty cool ability. It has the Void Mine, so if you move over an enemy unit, you roll 1d6 for each enemy unit within d6 of that enemy model. So you basically pick a model, right? One model that you move over, and on a 4+, the unit suffers d6 mortal wounds. That's pretty insane. So if your opponent's not careful and doesn't spread their models out, you can actually hit several units with this ability and do d6 mortal wounds to every one of them on a 4-up. Again, is this ever going to truly happen? I've gotten it to work 1 time, and it only did d6 mortal wounds to the unit I moved over, and it didn't do any, I didn't roll the 4+ on the other units that were nearby, but it was potentially game-breaking. It was potentially game-winning in that scenario. I rolled bad, so it didn't end up happening, but it was still pretty cool. Now, I do want to mention, okay, so the weapon I just remembered, it's the Dark Scythe. That's the weapon it's called, and it's actually AP -4, and it has 6 attacks apiece. So you have 12 attacks, re-rolling all hits. Remember, you can give it sustained hits or lethal hits in the Reaper's Wager detachment. So it can really mulch heavy infantry. It's like one of the best killers of heavy infantry in the entire game with the high AP, high damage, and high strength. It's really quite good. I'm a real fan of it. Also, in Sky Splinter Assault, if you want to kind of go more of the Sky Splinter Assault route, you can also use Night Shield on it because it is a vehicle. It is a Druhkari vehicle, so you can get a 4+ invulnerable save on it. So I would say this is not quite an auto-include, but it is a strong choice, and I'm actually going to put it ahead of the Ravager because it is so much more powerful the turn that it comes in. And honestly, if you design your list around it to make it work, it can absolutely dominate. And there is a Druhkari player out there, and we all know who he is very good, and he's run a couple of these in his lists and done very well with them and won GTs with them. And I think it's obviously very possible to do that for you guys as well because the Voidraven Bomber is really good. I don't think it's in a meta that's really good for it right now because a lot of people are gearing up for knights. So if people take things like Gladiator Lancers and stuff like that can kill knights, they can absolutely slaughter this thing. So, it is meta dependent. It is meta dependent. But it is a strong choice, and I think it can be good, even at a 235 point cost. Alrighty. Next unit is Drazhar. I'm going to save the time on this one. I'm going to put him in strong choice, but he's going to be behind the Ravager right here. I think he's really good. The problem with Drazhar, in my honest opinion, is that even though he's kind of on the cheaper side, an Archon in most cases will be better, right? Especially in Sky Splinter Assault. If you're running Drazhar with Incubi, it's probably best you run him in Reaper's Wager or Real Space Raid, because in Sky Splinter Assault, they get +1 to wound anyway for coming out of a transport. Yes, you don't have to come out of a transport with Drazhar in, Sky Splinter, so I guess that is kind of decent. He is tougher in a conventional sense. right? Because he has a 4-up invul base and he has a 2-up armor save, so he is tougher in that way. But, you know, he's really not super good. Basically, I'm just saying he's good, but he's not an auto-include, right? You could easily run an Archon in your, unit of Incubi and be just as effective against infantry units. The only thing Drazhar is better against is things that aren't infantry. So things like beasts, mounted units, stuff like that. He will be more effective against those targets with his own attacks than an Archon will be. So, yeah, I like Drazhar. I just, obviously don't think he's better than an Archon. So, he is a strong choice, but he's overshadowed in a lot of ways by the Archon in at least 2 of the 3 detachments. Alrighty, let's talk about Lilith. I don't think Lilith is anything except absolute S tier, and I would actually put her above the Archon himself, because although you will have an Archon in your list kind of as a default, the second character you're going to pick up is definitely Lilith, because she is a monster. She is one of the only characters in the game that can slaughter basically any infantry unit dead. She can kill 10 Space Marines easily by herself. I've seen her do it. She can kill a lot of Space Marines because she has sustained hits too. And when she goes crazy, she gets 12 attacks or 10 attacks with her blades. So basically, this is what Lilith does for you guys who don't know. And a lot of people are surprised by her, but if you look at her raw stats, they're absolutely insane. And on top of the buffs you can give her, they become quite ridiculous very quickly. So, first of all, she has 8 attacks base, and that doesn't seem that bad until you read a little bit deeper. Hits on 2s, she has strength 3, which isn't good, but you don't need the strength. AP -2, damage 1. You're like, oh, okay, she doesn't look that good. But she has sustained hits 2 and anti-infantry 2+. So she's hitting on 2s and wounding on 2s against infantry. Furthermore, she benefits from the strength characteristic if she's leading a unit, and the AP bonus that she gets. So when she joins a squad of witches, she gets +1 AP, and she gets +1 strength. The strength doesn't really matter except against non-infantry targets, but that means she's swinging at AP -3 before we factor in the extra AP you get from pain tokens. So this girl can charge a unit of Space Marines. Let's say Reaper's Wager, for example, right? You're in Reaper's Wager, you have sustained hits 2, you can give her unit lethal hits, and you're rerolling hits. So now she has sustained hits 2, rerolling hits, so you're going to be fishing for 6s, and you're getting lethal hits, and then you're wounding on 2+ as well, which is insane. And by the way, if you are losing the wager, Lilith is rerolling 1s to wound also. So she can murder an entire unit of Space Marines pretty easily as well. Obviously, you're going to need some luck with 6s, but she can do it, and the rest of her witches are going to absolutely make that overkill. So if you ever see somebody running like a brick of 10 Space Marines with a character and a lieutenant and stuff like that, can Lilith and 5 witches take it on? Absolutely. Now, the other thing is that once per game, she can increase her attacks characteristic to 12. So it's no longer 8 attacks. It is 12 attacks now. And she gets a 3+ invul. The invul save doesn't really matter because it's basically, it's only until the end of the phase, right? So like, yeah, it's, 3+ invul, it's great. But nothing is going to survive against her anyway most of the time. The 3+ invul does kind of save her when she can't kill the enemy unit, but usually the enemy unit dies after she hits this ability. So yeah, she is absolutely incredible. She also has a base 4-up invul, which isn't really that good, but, it's one of those things that can come in handy every once in a while. And yeah, Lilith is awesome. So she's absolutely, in my honest view, one of the best characters, not only in the Codex, index, but in the entire game. All right, let's talk about the Raider. The Raider is a pretty quintessential transport for the Druhkari. You know, it can carry 11 models, which isn't bad. It can't carry 12, which makes it a little bit awkward for some units to fit in it, which kind of sucks. It does have an auto advance 6 ability. It has 1 Dark Lance, and it's pretty trash as far as its durability goes. I honestly put this in a strong choice, but it's not high on the list. I would actually put it back here. The reason being is oftentimes you're going to pick a unit of 10 and that's the only choice you have for transport. It's kind of like a Wave Serpent for the Eldar. It's the only transport that can carry 10 models, so you're going to pick it. But is it really that good for the points, right? Like the Eldar Wave Serpent's 125. This thing is, I want to say 75 points, but I could be wrong. I think it recently got a points decrease, if I'm not mistaken, in the Druhkari. But I just want to double check that for you guys real quick. It's been a while since I've actually played the Druhkari, so it's been a month or two. Yeah, so the Raider is actually, let's see. The Raider, okay, yeah, it did. Okay, the Raider's 75 points, so it did get decreased a little bit. It's cheap, right? It is a cheap transport. But the thing you have to think about is, can it hide effectively, and can I hide multiple Raiders effectively? You're probably not going to be able to hide multiple Raiders effectively, and I would say maybe 1 or 2 Raiders max in your army, right? So the Raider is decent, but it's definitely not the best. And I think you could probably get away from, you could probably get away with not using Raider at all. Okay, let's talk about Wracks. So Wracks are a situational choice, in my humble opinion. Wracks are okay. I think I've seen people use Wracks effectively. I honestly have never had them do anything except die and move block and stuff, so they're not really a damage dealing unit. As far as them being a unit that can, move block or be some sort of utility, they're kind of slow. They don't have scout. They don't have infiltrate. You don't want to put them in a transport. You don't want to attach them to a character. Except, maybe Urien, but I think you're just adding points to Urien anyway. Maybe you just take them on Urien just to give them a little bit more of a cushion. But in general, I don't think they're that good. 55 points is pretty cheap, but for the same price point, 55 points, you can just get, if you take a unit of Mandrakes, that's only 10 more points, right? I will say this, though. What's good about these guys is that they're slightly more durable than the average Dark Eldar, so if you use them as a home base protector, they can survive some indirect fire. If you use them as something that can screen, they can take a little bit more damage, so your opponent's going to have to throw a little bit more into them to kill them. And they do give you a pain token when they die. They will probably never kill an enemy unit unless you get lucky. But they do give you that little bit of extra pain token management. So some armies actually take a squad of Wracks just because with the calculations that they do on the first turn, they need an extra pain token. So it's always good to guarantee yourself an extra pain token in the early game. And I would agree. I would agree with that. I think sometimes that's needed. So that's why I say they're kind of a situational choice, right? I would actually say they're a little bit better than Reavers here, but they're still situational in that you don't always need them. It depends on the type of army you're bringing, because sometimes you don't need that extra pain token early on. Okay. Beastmaster. Auto include. The Beast Pack is amazing. It rerolls charge rolls. It rerolls hit rolls of 1, which is really good just to have as a base ability. But it's also extremely fast. It moves 12 inches and it scouts 9, which basically means it can charge you turn 1, right? Scouts 9 plus movement 12 plus beasts, which means you can move through ruins and stuff like that. Plus you reroll charge rolls. This unit can take an unaware opponent and just absolutely end the game in a single turn, right? You really have to be careful when playing Dark Eldar because you have to mitigate the Beast Pack's ability to block you in. A lot of times, if the Dark Eldar player goes first, there's just nothing you can do, right? The Beast Pack is really good at move blocking. It's really good at tying up stuff in close combat. It is pretty durable in the amount of wounds that it has, but it doesn't have many models in the unit. So that is a concern that you have to worry about with these guys is, yes, there's a lot of wounds, but there's not a lot of models. So if you go up against enemy units that heroically intervene with damage 3 weapons or damage 2 weapons, they're going to die very quickly. They're really only good at absorbing things like damage 1 weapons or like a lot of little tiny attacks because they're pretty fragile otherwise. So oftentimes you're just going to use them to move block. But they are very strong. One of the quintessential Druhkari index units, I think. And I really hope, this is me praying to the Dark Muses here a little bit, that they don't axe them in the Codex. I hope they reveal either a new Beastmaster pack or just say, you know what? They're still in the Codex because we really haven't, been able to create a new Beast pack yet. And we're just gonna get rid of them for now, but they're gonna return, right? Like the models themselves are gone, but they're still in the index or still in the Codex. That's what I mean. So I hope they do that and not go the other route, which is just put them in Legends. Okay, next up is the Succubus. The Succubus is, honestly, I think it's a pretty strong choice. I'm gonna put it right here, right above the Raider. Why do I think the Succubus is a strong choice? It's 45 points. It's a really cheap character. And basically what you want to do is you want to take a squad of witches. You want to split them up in a Venom. You probably have another Venom somewhere on the battlefield as well. You have Lilith. And you have a Succubus. And that way, the 5 witches can go with both Lilith and the Succubus equally. Now, the other way to do this is to run a squad of 5 witches by themselves and like throw them in reserve or something, or just use them as a cheap move blocking unit. But I don't really like to do that because it just seems so wasteful. Even though they're so cheap, it's only a 40-point unit when you account for the fact that you're splitting the unit in half. I would much rather them be able to trade as an 80-point unit with a Succubus. And this also gives you a kind of a decent fights first. Like, even if you don't want to pay for 2 Venoms, guys, in some detachments, it may be worth it to just have the Succubus and Witches on foot because they can act as a heroic intervention unit that can give you fights first. And the Succubus has sustained hits 1 for her unit, so they're all getting sustained hits 1. When they're empowered, they get fights first, and they're not bad in combat once that combo hits, right? So, especially in Reaper's Wager, if you have the CP available, and you won't always have the CP available because, again, the Druhkari Index has a lot of great stratagems, but not a lot of CP. So you might not be able to do it all. But just having the ability to do it means that your opponent might be a little bit wary about making certain decisions. So I like the Succubus a lot. I think it adds a lot of dimension to a simple squad of 5 witches. And, sustained hits 1 and fights first is nothing to laugh at. And also the Succubus has a pretty good amount of attacks herself. 6 attacks with, anti-infantry 3+. Not bad. All right, looking at the next unit, the Venom. The Venom is an auto-include. Let's just get that out of the way right now. I'm going to put it ahead of most things. It's an auto-include because you're going to use at least a couple Venoms in every single Druhkari army. Right? It's not just a strong choice because I think personally, this is my personal opinion, I don't think you need a Raider in every single list, but I think you need a Venom in every list. Because the way the Dark Eldar want to play, especially with things like Lilith and Archons and stuff, is you want to be able to hop in and out, potentially, of your Venom after you kill something, so you can get multiple activations out of these fairly cheap units that are hyper-aggressive in close combat and hyper, effective. And Venoms are a cheap way of being able to do this. They're not very defensible. They don't do a lot of damage. Really, their damage is actually quite pathetic against a lot of targets. But they allow you to hop in and out of them, and that's why they're good. So, a couple of Venoms, I think, are honestly a pretty solid staple auto-include in most Druhkari lists because of that ability. And they also allow you to split a unit up into two, which means that squads of 10 witches, which you can't take in squads of 5, can become 2 squads of 5 if you have a Venom. Same thing for Cobalite Warriors. So I do think for that reason alone, they're one of the most quintessential units in the army. All right. Homunculus. Garbage. Maybe some people will disagree here. I've used the Homunculus a couple times in some rack units because I thought, oh, hey, maybe the Homunculus will make these better. Nope. Having a 4+ Feel No Pain in a squad of Wracks is basically useless for the points you pay for the Homunculus. And the Homunculus can't even join Grotesques. You know, if he could join Grotesques and give them a 4+ Feel No Pain, that would be amazing. But he doesn't. He's really not that good. I don't like the Homunculus. Let's just put it that way. I do not like him. So yeah, he sucks. Garbage. I would never waste the points on him, ever. And again, if I'm wrong here, and if I'm wrong and the Homunculus is actually good, please tell me in the comments, because God, I've been using him badly. Tell me what he's good at. Tell me, please, because to me, he's just a big pile of crap. But anyway, I'd like to see him used more, and I'm glad actually that the Codex is coming out, so maybe he'll get his rules changed. All right, the next unit up is Mandrakes. So they got a new kill team. They're looking good. This is an old picture, but Mandrakes are auto-include. Now, I will put them kind of lower on the list because they're more of an auto-include in the strictest sense that we don't have anything else that infiltrates. So we need an infiltration unit. But I will also say this. The Mandrakes are cheap, which also makes them a good infiltration unit, of course, because they're going to be killed usually. And they have uppy downy. So let's say you go second, right? And you hide your Mandrakes well. You will be able to pick them up and put them wherever you want in your movement phase, which means after your secondaries, you know which secondaries you have. You can pick them up, end of the movement phase. They come back in reserve anywhere on the board, which makes your opponent have to think about how they deploy as well if you go second. So I think they're a great unit. I love Mandrakes. I love running a couple of units of these guys. I actually think 2 squads of 5 is the average. You probably should be running 2 squads of 5. 1 squad to uppy downy, and then maybe 1 squad to screen or move block, depending on what your opponent does, and depending on whether you or not you go first. As far as their weapons go, their melee weapons are strength 5, but AP 0. They have 3 attacks apiece, so they're really good at killing things like rangers and, you know, other really light infantry. They're not really good against heavy infantry at all. They just bounce. And their range attack it's okay. It has devastating wounds, but it also is like barely any AP. So yeah, they're not a great damage dealing unit, but they're a really good secondary unit, and they're a really good move blocker, screener, and infiltrator. Okay, next up is the Kronos. The Kronos is the unsung hero of the Druhkari, and it's also an auto-include in the army. Now, I will put it below Mandrakes, but you at least want to have one of these in your army minimum because it allows you to recycle pain tokens. Whenever a unit uses a pain token within 9 inches of this thing, you get to roll a dice. And on a 4-up, you get that pain token back and you can redistribute it again. And potentially you can have an infinite string of pain tokens. I actually rolled so well once that I was able to essentially power everything within 9 inches of the Kronos. It was insane. And I really love the Kronos. I call him Little Chrono. And he's great. He's only 50 points. That's the kicker, right? Little Chrono is only 50 points. He's super cute with his tentacles and everything. And his huge, spirit leech, spirit siphon, where he like sticks it in you like a brain bug from, Starship Troopers. He's a great model. Looks beautiful, super effective, And I love his ability, just basically making your army more efficient. He's also pretty tough, and he's good for secondaries. He's like one of the best models in the game to use Sabotage on, because he's going to be primarily in the midfield, helping out your units get more pain tokens and stuff. Sometimes he is in the backfield, but you could easily just move him up 7 inches and like start sabotaging an objective, a secondary objective, and he's tough enough to where your opponent's going to have to dedicate some serious anti-large to be able to kill him. And typically speaking, your opponent is not going to be able to do that all the time. So he's a really good way of scoring you points. And I just love the guy. And obviously, being able to do stuff like, recover assets with something that you don't need, right? So in your backfield, you probably have like Wracks or 5 Cobalites or something like that. And then in the midboard, you can easily have this guy recover assets and you don't lose any efficiency. One of the best things about Dark Eldar is we have so many different units that are able to score points for us. We don't lose efficiency on the units that actually need to kill things. One of the things about Eldari is sometimes they don't have as easy access to those things in the later stages of the game. And the Druhkari have so many cheap units that they're able to do this way better. So yeah, Kronos, S tier, auto include. You should definitely think about having one in your list, always. Next up is the Void. This is the Razorwing Jet Fighter. So the Razorwing Jet Fighter, it looks like a Voidraven, but it's not. Razorwing Jet Fighter is just the fighter version of the Void Bomber, basically. What do I think about this guy? Well, honestly, I know Scary recently ran a list with like 2 of them and like 2 Voidravens. I think that's like, maybe only he can do that. You know what I mean? It's kind of like a pro basketball player playing with one arm and beating somebody like that plays college ball or something like that, right? It's not surprising. It's not surprising that he did well with it. Now, I will say, I don't think it's complete garbage. I think it's pretty decent. It gets +1 to hit against units on the ground. You can take 2 Dark Lances with it. It does also get a Splinter Rifle or a Splinter Cannon, so that's interesting, and it gets a bunch of missiles that you can use. The missiles are actually pretty decent as well. So against infantry and ground targets and stuff, I don't think it's that bad. And it's not anywhere near the price of the Voidraven Bomber, but it's also less effective in that it's just less effective against infantry units. So I think it's okay. It's hard because I've run it once and it just didn't do anything. So I really don't have that much experience with it. I'm going to put it in situational, but like kind of on the lower end of situational. Like, it can work if you have a plan for it and if you're a good player, but if you don't really know what you're doing with it, it's going to be crap, right? It's not a conventionally good unit. So you're going to have to use it in some different unique ways. But I don't think it's not crappy, but if you don't know how to really fit it into a list or use a list that works around it, it will be crappy. Okay, let's talk about Incubi. So Incubi, they're a super strong choice, and I'm going to put them up here, actually ahead of the Court of the Archon. Let's see if I can get them there. There we go. So they're one of the best melee units in the entire book. However, they have gotten increased in points. They used to be 75 points in the Druhkari, now they're 85 points. They do kind of need a character to join them to make them really powerful. They're really powerful in Reaper's Wager and Sky Splinter. Not so great in, Real Space Raid, to be honest. Real Space Raid's kind of a terrible detachment anyway, in my opinion. Like, I've spent a lot of time playing Real Space Raid, and I can tell you that it's really not great. I know a lot of players out there will disagree, but it's not good. The other detachments are much better. So, I'm not saying you can't win with the detachment. I'm just saying that it's harder to design a list that's effective, and I almost think you have to be almost an expert Druhkari player to really, really know the detachment inside and out and do very well with it. So what are Incubi? Well, basically they're a Marine killer, but in certain detachments, they turn that up to 11. So they can actually deal significant damage to vehicles and things like that and monsters in close combat with Sky Splinter Assault and with Reaper's Wager, because they have access to things like lethal hits in Reaper's Wager, and they have access to +1 to wound or lance in Sky Splinter. So this allows them to hit tougher enemies more consistently with high AP damage. So they're getting AP -3 when they're empowered, and when you have an Archon with them, they're getting rerolls of, well, just all rerolls to hit and all rerolls to wound with the Archon, right? So they're very good with the Archon, and that's really where you want to take them with. Sometimes you want to take them with Drazhar, but in most situations, because of that wound reroll, you're going to want to take them with the Archon. So yeah, they're very good. They also have a Battle Shock type of ability in the fight phase. So when they're fighting against enemy units, you can potentially get a pain token, and you prevent your opponent from using stratagems on their unit. This can be really, really good. I highly underestimated this when I started playing Druhkari. But being able to Battle Shock somebody when you charge in, and then your opponent, by the way, it's before you make attacks. So a lot of stratagems will say when your opponent selects their unit to attack, right? So when they select you to attack, you can say, oh, I'm -1 to wound, or I'm -1 damage, or I'm going to fight on death. All of those things, right? But if they're Battle Shocked before they are allowed to select the stratagem, they can't use it. So, is it always going to happen? No. But it is situationally good when it does. I've had moments where my opponent's like, I'm going to fight on death. And I'm like, you can't do it. You're going to have to take a Battle Shock test first, because Incubi force Battle Shock. Okay. Next unit is a Reaper's Wager special. Again, it's the Shadowseer. And we're going to put that directly into the trash, because the Shadowseer is not good in Reaper's Wager. So I know a lot of people will tell me, oh, but it's great with the Deep Strike enhancement. It's not. It's terrible. It's awful. Lone Op 18 is not really that effective on an infantry unit like this. Again, they're in melee most of the time, and because of the way terrain is laid out and stuff, there's just not a lot of space for a unit to really care about shooting something outside of 18. Like, it's usually going to be within 18. So Shadowseer's ability really doesn't do anything for the Quinn units in the Reaper's Wager detachment. Also, Hazardous really doesn't help either, because Reaper's Wager is all about killing something before you have to worry about that, right? They don't have the benefit of battle focus tokens like the Eldari. They're not going to, if you fall back from them, they're not going to be able to do reactive move and stuff like that. So, in my opinion, the Shadowseer is even worse than it is in Ghost of the Webway or, the Eldari book. So I got to put it in D tier. It's garbage, guys. I'm sorry. If you have a way to use it, let me know. But honestly, I just think it's crap in Reaper's Wager on a personal level. It really is. Okay. Next unit, Coblite Warriors. Another auto include, but they're going to be a little higher up because they're usually in the list. At least one unit. Now, Coblite Warriors are really just in the army because of sticky objectives, but they do also have some good shooting. And you do basically have a gunboat with a Venom in it with all the special weapons and heavy weapons from the unit. So you can take a Dark Lance, a Splinter Cannon, a Blaster, and a Shredder, as well as, the guy that gives the unit grenades. I personally like to give the stupid squad grenades, but not always. So it just depends on the matchup, like what I plan to do with that unit. But in most cases, you're just using them for, kind of a little bit of a backfield defender and a sticky objective, to put sticky down on the battlefield. But they're a good unit for 100 points. They recently got reduced to 100. They're very solid at 100 points. They're fast. They're movement 8 base, which means with an advanced roll that you can possibly reroll, they can actually move quick enough to get to your home objective to another objective on the battlefield if you roll high enough there. So yeah, they're a good unit, a solid unit. They are pretty much auto-include in most lists. And I will say, I've never really had an experience with them where I'm like, they did nothing. So, that is really good. And they look cool. That's the other thing. Okay. Grotesques. Grotesques are good, but they're more of a situational unit. Now, I'm going to put them in B tier here, just ahead of the Wracks. Why I say they're situational is because they're kind of a tough unit. They're weirdly tough. They have 4 wounds. They have a 5-up feel no pain. They have a 6-up invul. I think they're toughness 5. So they're good against like things like bolter shots and stuff like that. What they're not really great against is close combat. If somebody charges them with, power fists or anything that's like a high strength, they will die pretty easily, even with feel no pain. But they do have one of the best overwatches that Dark Eldar have access to. So they do have the liquefier guns. All of them can carry liquefier guns for free, and you can take a unit of 6 max. So they can be pretty deadly with those. Now, I do think that they're really only effective in Reaper's Wager, although I will say in other detachments they could have like niche uses. Again, it really just depends on how you plan to use them, because in Real Space Raid, for example, you can give them -1 to wound. So that may be useful for that detachment if you're using them as more of a defensive type unit that wants to absorb damage. -1 to wound can be very good. In Reaper's Wager, though, they get access to 2 things that really boost them. The first thing is advance and shoot. In Reaper's Wager, you can spend a CP and they can advance and shoot. This kind of gets rid of their innate slowness and allows them to fire their liquefier guns and charge, right? Advance, shoot, and charge is what I should say. So you could advance, shoot, and charge with them, or you can give them sustained hits in combat or lethal hits in combat. So they have a little bit of more punch in close combat as well with their close combat attacks. So yeah, Grotesques, again, situationally good. I think they're good in Reaper's Wager. I think they're okay in Real Space Raid, and I think they're pretty bad in Sky Splinter, but again, I know what people are going to say in the comments. But Scary ran a couple of them in Sky Splinter this one time. He's run everything, guys. He's literally won everything and won with it. He's a great player. But as far as a unit goes, I don't think, at least from my perspective, they're that good. I think there's better uses for the points in general in other detachments. But in Reaper's Wager, they are pretty good. But I would probably still rate them kind of like B tier. If I was only looking at Reaper's Wager, I would say that they're a strong choice and put them over here. But looking at them in their entirety, probably a B tier unit. Alrighty, let's look at Skyweavers. So these are the Harlequin jet bikes, and they're going to be a poor choice, but they're better than the Voidweaver. Now, the reason why they're a poor choice is because they really just don't get a lot from the detachment. They don't reroll all of their hits with pain tokens. The Druhkari do not need more Haywire, right? Like the Druhkari army already has a ton of Haywire options. You have Scourges, you have Talos. We have enough anti-large. We have enough anti-vehicle, right? What we don't have is, typically speaking, we don't have stuff that can like really do a ton of damage for the points against things like Knights. And I'm sorry, these guys aren't going to do anything for you in that department. We also have better combat than what the Skyweavers can provide. Again, we don't need damage to combat weapons. We have Incubi. We have other units that have damage too. So I think the Skyweavers just get outclassed because we have better options already baked into the army. And that's really it. I mean, they have a permanent -1 to hit, but that's still not that good. Even if they're losing the wager, getting rerolls to hit of 1 and wound of 1, it doesn't make up for the fact that you're only getting 2 Haywire blasters versus, getting 2 with twin linked and all this other stuff with the Talos, or getting 4 of them in a Scourge squad. Okay, let's talk about the Solitaire in Reaper's Wager. I actually think the Solitaire in Reaper's Wager is pretty solid. He is a lone operative, and I think he has a lot of play in that detachment. However, I'm going to kind of put him in the same category as the Grotesques, right? He can only be taken in Reaper's Wager, and even though he's a good choice, he's not always the best choice. And the reason being is we have something better. and it's Lilith. Lilith is much better into a vast majority of targets that the Solitaire would be good at, right? The Solitaire, by the way, does have strength 6, AP minus 2 damage 2 on his weapons. He can get up to 12 attacks when he blitzes, which is the same amount of attacks Lilith has, which kind of makes it seem like, oh, well, he's better, right? Because he has damage 2 weapons. But he doesn't have sustained hits 2. He doesn't have anti-infantry 2. And on top of that, Lilith has 2 extra pips of AP over him when empowered. She's also re-rolling all of her hits. That may not seem like a big deal, but it means that she can spike 6s and get a bunch of more sustained hits, even though she's damage 1. So on average dice, I've actually found that against infantry units, which is the vast majority of units in the game, that, you know, you're going to be targeting with things like Lilith and the Solitaire and stuff like that, Lilith just does more damage. Solitaire is still good. He is a lone op, right? He is cheaper than the Lilith package, so he's cheaper than Lilith and 5 Witches and a Venom. But, you know, I mean, that's kind of where the similarities end. However, having said that, I would honestly take the Solitaire in a Reaper's Wagers list. Not all the time, but I would definitely take him if I was a little bit short on, maybe I wanted another Incubi squad in a Venom and I didn't have the points for it. I may consider taking the Solitaire instead, because he is pretty damn good, right? In Reaper's Wager, he can do some crazy shit as well. Like, you can give him lethal hits, which is nice, with precision. You can give him sustained hits 1. He rerolls 1s as well, even when he's losing the wager or winning the wager, so that is nice also. Okay. Lastly, let's talk about Hellions. Hellions are another situational unit. I'm going to put them just ahead of the Solitaire here. And they're quite a situational unit, I think, because they're only good in like one detachment, which is Reaper's Wager. They're not very good in Sky Splinter because they're not getting any of the benefits of the detachment. They're not very good in Real Space Raid because, again, they don't get a lot of benefits from the stratagems there. In Sky Splinter, in Reaper's Wager, they get exactly what they need via the stratagems. So they can have lethal hits because they already have sustained hits. So you can have a squad of 5 with lethal hits, sustained hits 1, re-rolling all hits, and you can do advance and charge if you have the CP, which helps them get around ruins and stuff like that because they are mounted. So sometimes it is a little tricky to move them around stuff. But yeah, these guys are actually really good in that detachment against Marines and stuff like that. I think, believe it or not, I think the key to this unit is that they're cheap. They're only 75 points, and they do a lot of damage for the cost. So they don't do enough, or let me put it this way. They don't do as much damage as Incubi on a base level, but once you start like buffing them with, sustained hits and lethal hits, and, now they're re-rolling all hits, and, if they're in the Reaper's Wager and you're losing it for some reason, they're re-rolling 1s to wound, they can actually become quite a bit better for the points than Incubi in close combat. Obviously, they have some downsides, but they also have 2 wounds apiece. So that is also something to think about, right? They are slightly more durable because of that against certain types of weapons. So I really like Hellions, but I like them specifically in Reaper's Wager, and I don't think they're all that good in other detachments. Now, what I'm really excited for is the Codex, because I really want Hellions to be good again. When the Dark Eldar Codex came out in 5th edition, Hellions were one of my favorite units. Actually, they were my favorite unit. I had a squad of 10, and what I would do is the leader of the squad, I think was called the Heliarch, and the Heliarch had an ability to basically pull an enemy character out of a unit. So like back then, it's kind of like what you have now, right? Like characters can join units, but back in the day, a character could join pretty much any unit as long as it was of the same type. So you'd often have, Space Marine players with like a Terminator, captain or something like that in a squad, in a regular unit, or you'd have like a, lieutenant in a squad, or something along those lines, right? And so what you could do with this army is you would charge in, fight first, because back then it was based on initiative, kind of like Warhammer Old World is now, and Hellions were initiative 5. So they struck before all of the enemy units, right? So like they're striking first. They might have even been initiative 6. I just can't remember. I think it was initiative 5 though. And you charge in, and basically what you do is you take the enemy character with you when you fall back. So you use this you like roll the dice, and I think on a 2-up, you were allowed to take the enemy character back with you, which would sometimes allow you to drag the enemy character through your own army and allow other units to dogpile them. It was just insane. It was so fun. So I'm hoping they get like a really cool special rule where it's like kind of like that, where the Heliarch can attack the character, or the Hellions can like do damage to models and like take them with them. I don't know, something cool like that, right? They probably won't, but I'm hoping they're good at least, and that they have good, choices, and that they're actually part of the witch cults that they should be in, because I think they're supposed to be a witch cult unit if I'm not mistaken. But anyway. Okay, so that's all the units. Unfortunately, of course, we have the Tantalus here, and we're just not going to put that anywhere because it's a Legends unit, but I do like the Tantalus. It's cool. I hope, maybe it'll get new rules in 11th edition or something like that, because it's a really cool model, but probably not. I think the Dark Eldar do need like a unit like the Tantalus as like a big model, because like every army has a big model, except for the Dark Eldar. Like, what the hell, right? Like, the Druhkari need a big model as well. So yeah, this is my tier list. I know a lot of things didn't make it into the poor choice or garbage tier. A couple things did make it in. But I think that's generally okay for that not to be the case, because if you know an army and you can play it well, almost every unit is at least situational, right? Like, every unit in an army is at least going to be situationally good depending on your list. The poor choices and the garbage choices are pretty much things that GW almost wants to be bad, right? Like, because they just have no synergy, or they just are not good. Like, okay, the Voidweaver is a huge hit and a miss from GW and their writing team. That was just awful. I think when they probably wrote the Codex, it was probably pretty good. And then, terrain changed a little bit. Things kind of went a different way, and the Voidweaver just, Lone Op 18 is just not that good of an ability. So, yeah, unfortunate. And then, of course, the Death Jester isn't really great in that detachment because he's kind of overpriced. The Homunculus really doesn't do anything for the army. The Shadow Seer doesn't do anything for the army. Like, these models have no synergy with other things in the army, so that's why they're kind of trash. But anyway. All right, guys, that is going to be it for today's video. Thanks for watching. We have more Druhkari content coming out later this week. Hopefully there's some updates later this week from GW in regards to maybe some new kits or stuff or something like that. I'm really hoping they don't drop the ball on this one and like basically give Druhkari players just a couple new models and say, here you go, like, hope you enjoyed this new sculpt that we gave you, and basically tell us to F off after that. We're not going to give you anything else. So I'm really hoping that's the case. There are going to be 5 detachments for the Druhkari in the Codex, which means Reaper's Wager is included. Or excuse me, Reaper's Wager is different than the 5 detachments in the Codex. So we're going to have 5 plus Reaper's Wager, so 6 detachments total, which is really awesome. I'm really excited to see that. I'm really excited to see a Kabbalite style detachment where you have a bunch of Kabbalite warriors and Ravagers and stuff. I'm really excited to see the Witch Cults return. I'm really excited to see a Coven detachment. That's going to be awesome. And who knows what else there's going to be, right? Like, I don't know. What do you guys think in the comment section? What do you guys think the detachments will be? I know there's going to be obviously the main 3, right? The Witches, the Coven, and the Cabals. But what else? Is there going to be a pleasure coven where you can take all sorts of stuff? Who knows, right? Is there going to be a kind of a Mandrake style coven where it's like Kadruka or something? I don't know. Maybe that's the new character. That's another new character that they haven't revealed. That would be really awesome, right? So, yeah. Anyway, signing off for now. Thanks for watching. If you guys do want to join the channel's Discord, we have a huge Discord with Dark Eldar players and Eldar players alike. Great place. We've had rarely any issues with anybody in the, well, we've had a couple issues here and there with people sneaking in that are kind of, you know, not supposed to be there. But for the most part, it's an awesome Discord, and, you know, it's welcome to all. Feel free to join, and I'll leave the link in the description below for you. All you have to do is sign up for a Patreon free trial, and you can get access to our channel's Discord. Also, I have a channel store page and an Amazon affiliate link if you want some discounted Eldar minis. There are some Dark Eldar things on there. I don't know if they're still available, but you can check it out because they might be. I recently today picked up a Druhkari combat patrol from my local game store, and it was cheap. It wasn't the $400 that it's going for on eBay right now. So, you know, it was a good pickup. So if you can get that old combat patrol, get it now, because pretty soon they're all going to be gone. All right, guys, that's going to be it for today's video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one, everybody. Peace out.